fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 272 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host, as always, Adnan Ikic, at Say Which Way. Adnan, welcome back. I know there was my absence for vacation and then the Hawks just choosing to interrupt our show multiple times. But happy to have you back on to get into this coaching search. Adnan, how we doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, happy to be back. I haven't been on the show in like weeks at this point. I think the last time I was on was when Joe was on with us, to be honest. Well, not exactly, but that's what it feels like. But yeah, no, definitely happy to be back and filled with takes on the coaching search and on the Falcons in general right now.
Yes, we're just bubbling over with coaching takes here because we're also, as you saw, we have Joe Patrick here. He's at JAPatrick200 on the Twitters, X's, whatever you want to call it these days. Joe, welcome back. How are you doing this fine evening?
Thank you. I'm good, and I cannot wait for Adnan. I feel like it's like his energy bar has filled up now that he hasn't been on, been on the show for a while. And now he's got his special move ready to go, and so I can't wait to just hear the takes pop off.
Oh yeah, we're the cup runneth over with takes.
You guys are giving me some high expectations right now. Coming from a marketing background, we need to undersell and over deliver over here.
That's right.
True.
It's been building. Yeah, I know we had a $10 donation from Alex Foster. First donation from Alex. Thank you, Alex. He says, first time, long time. The Falcons have been searching for a coach, and Adnan hasn't been around for any of those episodes. Is that a coincidence? Adnan, you care to weigh in on the coaching search coincidentally?
Let's just say my opinion may or may not have more weight than Terry Fontenot's to Rich McKay and Arthur Blank.
Adnan is seeking to supplant. Yeah.
Given the fact that neither me nor Terry were at that press conference a few weeks ago, so I can neither confirm nor deny any of these baseless accusations.
Salacious rumors, yes. But appreciate everyone for joining us tonight. Welcome in, folks. Welcome Crimson Huntsman to the channel memberships. I guess I thought Crimson was already a channel member, but maybe it's the renewal. I don't know how this works on YouTube yet, but thank you, Crimson. Either way, welcome back. Welcome to, if it's the first time, maybe I've just seen you commenting. I don't know. Either way, welcome, guys. Welcome in. We're going to get down and dirty into this coaching search. And before I forget, I also want to thank Paul, our patron, Paul, for his $100 donation to the Senior Bowl Fund. He did it off air. So I just wanted to give Paul a big shout out and say that we really appreciate that. Paul, thank you so much for chipping in. And thanks to everyone else who's been chipping in over the past month. We really appreciate that. It helps a lot so that I've graduated from peanuts and leftover airplane granola bars to actual Waffle House at this point, I think, with what we've raised so far in the fundraiser. So that's a big step up for me personally. So thank you guys for that. Before we get into it too much, let me get you guys a quick word from tonight's sponsors. First of all, BetOnline, guys. It's playoff time in the NFL, and the road to Vegas goes through San Francisco, and it goes through Baltimore. BetOnline is your number one source for those playoff football odds, stats, trends, and lines, with everything from point spreads to hundreds of player performance props you can take a look at. I foolishly did bet the Texans spread last week because I was like 9.5 points. Texans, I think they can cover that. And like the first half, I felt pretty good about that. But then Vegas shows why they're right and we're always wrong with the Ravens pulling away. But some good games coming up this weekend, and I know you guys are itching to get in on that action. So head to BetOnline today. Stay updated on all those odds. BetOnline.ag is the site. Make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. And remember, BetOnline is where the game starts. And then real quick, let me check in. Since we don't do the post game, I can't bring you the instant reactions to my prize picks. But this week, my prize picks went 2 of 3, unfortunately, which means that we did not cash that sweet money. But We did get really close. Of course, Isaiah Pacheco did go more than 61.5 rushing yards. That one nailed it. Baker Mayfield more than 260.5 passing yards. Nailed it. Amon-Ra St. Brown did come in just shy of his number, which was 93.5. I think he had like 80. So, can't win them all. But Prize Picks, a lot of fun, guys. Appreciate them sponsoring the show. If you haven't played Prize Picks before, it's daily fantasy, and you play against the projections, not against other players. So it's a little bit different than your typical daily fantasy. You pick between 2 to 6 players, decide if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection. And the more players you pick, the more you can win, all the way up to 25 times your money. And I think even more now, because they have some special rates on some more difficult picks you can do. Like some of them are a higher number. If you feel like really good about Isaiah Pacheco, you're like, 61.5, that feels really low. I think he's going to get like 80, no problem. Then you could do the 81 and get a little bit better odds on it. But yeah, guys, check it out. It's not just NFL, so once that over, they've got any sport that you watch: NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college sports, obviously college basketball coming in now, MMA, boxing, esports, whatever you want, and Prize Picks entries can be made in as little as 60 seconds, and they offer fast withdrawals, super easy. All first-time users that deposit and use our promo code DBB, you guys will get a 100% deposit match up to $100. That means if you throw in 100, Prize Picks will match and give you another 100. If you throw in 50, Prize Picks will match and give you 50. Just make sure when you sign up to use that promo code DBB. And yeah, appreciate it. That lets them know we sent you. Helps us out. Appreciate that, guys. And Prize Picks is notably available in Georgia, along with 70% of the U.S., since it is daily fantasy. So make sure to check that out. Thanks again to Prize Picks for sponsoring the show. And I know we had Chris Beese ask, what about curling? I don't know about curling. No one's ever asked about curling. That's a good one, though. That's like it feels like Stump the Truck when they do the draft prospects during the draft, that you could like stump the sports betting. It's like, do you have curling odds though? So maybe Prize Picks needs to get on that, because I know there's some curling fanatics out there. But
yeah, I know it's not winter, but it is an Olympic year.
It is
this coming
That's
August.
right.
So
Can you bet on the Olympics?
Is that invested in curling? It's like it comes around every 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, curling is in 2 years, so we're not even there yet.
Okay.
that's for the winter one. But
okay.
This is the year where I'm actually invested in gymnastics and 100-meter and all of that stuff. Yeah, I'm just a casual viewer. No offense to all the gymnasts out there. That stuff is really difficult.
It is.
Like,
it's like painful to watch. Those athletes.
Oh yeah, no, it puts us all to shame. Some truly talented folks out there. But folks, let's dive into this Falcons coaching search, which did narrow slightly with the news today that Jim Harbaugh was going to sign with the Chargers. That seemed imminent, considering that there was talk of him basically more or less canceling his Falcons interview or moving it. And when you hear something like that, that typically means like he's about to sign somewhere, because, and then that was the case. So Harbaugh off the table. Me personally never really thought Harbaugh was that high of a priority for the Falcons specifically, but he's off the table now. We've got a number of guys. Obviously, Bill Belichick, I'm sure, is still heavily in the mix, although that, according to Josh Kendall, the momentum there has cooled a little bit. We've got second interviews coming up for a number of guys, so I'm curious, Joe, I'll start with you as our guest tonight. Where do you sort of see this coaching staff leaning at this point? We've got a number of second interviews coming up, a number of candidates still to come, and of course some guys that we've already finished our interviews. Where are your preferences lie, and where do you think maybe this ends up?
Well, as far as my preference goes, and I try to stay out, just because of my role, like covering the team, I try to stay out of like my preference, but listen, I'll state it like until the once the coach is hired, then like I'll give the guy his fair shake, cover him objective. But I'm with, I think, you and the majority of who I would consider intelligent, smart Falcons fans, which is that this next coach is only going to have success if they get the quarterback position straightened out. So it seems reasonable to me that would be the number one priority in hiring any coach, is who's going to be best suited to be able to do that. And so to me, that is some of these younger, untested as far as being a head coach goes, but these younger coaches who have experience working directly with quarterbacks and being able to evaluate some different ones. And so I'm with you. Like, I love Bobby Slowick. I think Ben Johnson would be a good option. A lot of these guys, I think, have a lot of potential. I don't know if that's exactly the way the Falcons see it, and I honestly think it seems to me, just based on the way that the reporting has gone, that there may even be kind of like different preferences amongst different people within the organization who are making these decisions. And so I think one of the issues the Falcons are probably having during this course of interviewing all these coaches is kind of coalescing on somebody, like getting the idea, like getting everybody on board on the same page as to like what they want the trajectory to be for this team, and obviously what coach you're going to bring in to do that. And so again, kind of reacting to the reporting with Bill Belichick, like I would still think, like this is just me, I would still make him like the most likely of any individual candidate, but I still maintain that I would take the field of candidates over as more likely over Belichick, if that makes sense. So like I would take the field over Belichick, but I think Belichick is the most likely of any individual. And to me, that's just because it seems to be like that's kind of the guy that Arthur Blank instinctually wants. And I do feel like just kind of going back to the Arthur Smith thing, I obviously understand the reasons why he was let go. And certainly if they were to have kept him, it would look like really bad. They would have a major struggle kind of trying to sell that. And I think that's ultimately is why they let him go. But, it's just always, it's felt emotional to me in a way that it hasn't with Arthur Blank throughout most of this, since the end of the season started happening, which I'm sure really displeased him with what he thought this team was going to be. And so if that continues, then I do think that it probably would be Belichick. I think he's he's the emotional hire to make in this situation, because you're just like pounding the like, I just need to win now, damn it, and this guy's going to do it. But the most evident person out there, coach out there to make you a winner may not always be the most like prudent choice. It may be kind of a false flag. That's probably not the right terminology, but it's just like, it's like it could be a trap, so we'll see.
Yeah, a little fool's gold perhaps. Fool's gold perhaps, and sort of that the shiny object is not necessarily the most valuable one, but you certainly understand the idea behind the Belichick hire, and that he is the most proven, and obviously has a tremendous amount of playoff and Super Bowl experience, far more than any other coach you could get at this stage. So if you did happen to get to the playoffs, you would think Belichick would be a huge asset there because of all that experience to help a young team through that process. But curious, Adnan, what you think about the search at this point, because I know you were very much on the train of we should move on from Arthur Smith. They do eventually do that. It's been a bit of an odyssey since we last talked. It seemed like they were going all out for Belichick, and then it maybe cooler heads prevailed, and they sort of decided to stick it out a bit longer, and it's turned into an exhaustive coaching search now. I think they're close to interviewing, I think, twice as many candidates as they did the year they hired Arthur Smith. I think they hired 8, or they interviewed 8 the Arthur Smith year, and I think they're close to 16 candidates now this year. So clearly doing an exhaustive search in terms of numbers, but curious, Adnan, what you think about how this has played out so far.
Well, I'm right there with you guys, where had you asked me last week, it felt like Bill Belichick was a shoo-in, just because Arthur Blank really wants him, and Arthur Blank is the boss. And, what Arthur Blank wants, he gets, and that's normally how being an owner of an NFL team works. He had him out there on his yacht in some tropical part of the world, and that leaked on social media. We had Yacht Watch, which is peak NFL off season. I'm right there with you guys. I think that Arthur Blank really wants him, but there's a large disconnect with the rest of the organization. Whereas, maybe Rich McKay, maybe Terry Fontenot, maybe the other guys are like, we don't really want Bill Belichick, but Arthur Blank does. And, maybe it feels like Arthur Blank is sort of now acquiescing a little bit, and, sort of being like, all right, like, let's go through this extensively. It helps because Bill Belichick doesn't really have any other suitors at the moment from reports from what we've seen. I don't think he's really been linked with any other job. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if he's interviewed anywhere else. He's interviewed with the Falcons in person twice. But yeah, I do feel like just that factor alone is sort of giving them a bit of pause, and it's sort of letting them be a bit more patient. And I remember at the press conference, Arthur Blank talked about how one of his, sort of maybe even weaknesses is that he's not as patient as he should be, and maybe he's sort of looking in the mirror and saying, all right, let's leave no stone unturned right now. But I'm right there with you, Joe. If you put a gun to my head and told me who's going to be the next head coach of the Falcons, you have to be accurate. I would guess Bill Belichick, but I don't know for a fact. It certainly doesn't seem as much of a shoo-in as it was just a week ago. But Bobby Slowick seems to be gaining some serious momentum right now, and that's I think I went on record in week like 5 or 6 that Bobby Slowick is my number one candidate, even when the Ben Johnson hype was like reaching its climax. I don't know, like if you gave me the decision, I really hope it's gonna be Slowick. And you just look at the resume. It comes from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. Helped develop Brock Purdy and helped develop that San Francisco passing game last year. And then you look at the Texans offense with him coming in this season in comparison to last year. Last year, the Texans were 31st in yardage and in points. This year, they were top half. They were 12th in points, 14th in yardage. That was with a decimated offensive line. That was with a rookie quarterback. And I feel like with Slowick, you would be much more likely to sort of do what I want regarding the quarterback position, which is I really want the Falcons to get this right and to move up in the draft and to really don't wait for someone to fall to you at number 8. I feel like if you really want a quarterback, you need to really get it correctly. And in that case, I would really want to trade up for one of those top 3 candidates. I don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be on the table. We'll see what Chicago does. That's a conversation for another show. But definitely right now, this is just my very long-winded way of saying I really have no idea what the Falcons are going to do. I don't even think the Falcons know what they're going to do. Like, I don't even think that they've, maybe they're narrowing down some candidates, but, I think if you go into the building, if you're a fly on the wall, I'm right there with you, Joe. I think there's some disconnect with, there's no consensus with who to pick. And, that's one of the issues with having so many sort of voices.
Yeah.
It can work out when it all comes together, but sometimes when there is that disconnect, it sort of paralyzes you. And I think that's exactly where the Falcons are right now. And hence that's why they're having all of these interviews.
Yeah. No, they're clearly being very thorough. They've cast a wide net at coach. They've interviewed all the top candidates. I remember some years people being disappointed that they didn't talk to everyone, and it seems like they've made a real effort to talk to everyone. And I know like Mike McDonald has his supporters in the fan base. I know there's a significant chunk that wants Ben Johnson. And, we did the polls last week with the SB Nation Reacts asking Falcons fans who their preferences were in terms of their favorite candidate and their, least favorite candidate. And it was fascinating to see Ben Johnson the most popular, but only slightly. And Bill Belichick's the second most popular. Bobby Slowick was third. Raheem Morris was a distant fourth. But if you look at who Falcons fans really don't want, Bill Belichick is by far the most, disliked of all the candidates, like 3 times as much as anybody else. And then Raheem Morris, interestingly, is number 2. But there wasn't much consensus other than that people don't want Belichick. So
he's a polarizing candidate.
Yes,
high unfavorables.
Yes, exactly.
It's a shame because I really love a lot of these defensive minded candidates that are out there. Raheem Morris, Ejiro Evero, McDonald, Anthony Weaver out, consider that him. He worked on the defensive line. I love all these candidates. It's really a shame for the Falcons that they're in this spot, because and I wouldn't necessarily be against the Falcons hiring any of those guys, but for me, it wouldn't, I don't know what their plan would be at quarterback, like who they would be able to bring in on their staff on the offensive side that would be able to kind of lead that. And so I lean kind of away from a lot of those coaches just in terms of my personal preference. I actually did lean toward Raheem Morris at the very beginning of this. I really like I think he's got a real sterling kind of resume outside of like the head coaching record, but I think that's you can kind of explain some of that, but it's really a shame. But it'll be interesting to see who they end up with.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing on Belichick too. I wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Like his initial interview was on the Dreamboat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is different than it is for these other candidates. And to me, that signaled that he was going on. I think it was even reported that he had a one-on-one meeting with Arthur Blank.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what other coaches are meeting one-on-one with the owner for their introductory their introductory interview, and then going on to meet the rest? And I think it's interesting the way that it played out timeline-wise. And of course, some of this is just down to the natural parameters around when the Falcons were able to talk with certain coaches, and Belichick was just available, so they were able to do more with him earlier on. But I can envision a scenario, and again, this is if and there's a lot of speculating, but this is if he is kind of Arthur Blank's guy. I could very much see a scenario happening where they go into this meeting and Arthur Blank tells him what he wants to hear, and kind of gets him and then that's where a lot of this kind of news cycle really seemed to spin up after that. And then he had this second interview, and it seemed like shortly after that interview, then we got news that they were going to interview Harbaugh and a lot more coaches after that. So I do wonder what the difference was between those two, his first interview and then the second one.
I made a joke with my friends that, all right, all the real candidates are meeting personally with Arthur Blank, and then all the other ones, it's oh, Terry Rich, just get on a Zoom call with them and just report it. Report that we're doing an interview with these guys. But no, you're right. And I genuinely think that if this was one of those things where if Arthur Blank, fully had his way, I think Bill Belichick would have already been announced. But I think fully having his way also means what are we doing regarding personnel control? Maybe Arthur Blank doesn't want to acquiesce to Bill Belichick having demands. And I'm not saying, I'm just speculating here. This isn't any insider information. Don't, go to Twitter and say that I said this. But, maybe Bill Belichick wants full personnel control. And in which case, if that's the case, I'm out. I don't, I don't think it's a good idea to give someone who's probably nearing retirement full control over the roster, no matter who it is. But maybe we don't know. That could be a factor in why he hasn't been hired as well. Maybe Bill Belichick isn't moving from this, and Arthur Blank is saying, no, I don't want to give you full control. I want you as the coach, but I don't want you as the general manager. So, there's just so many factors that we just don't know about right now. And, also the Rich McKay factor as well. Maybe Bill Belichick doesn't want to report to Rich McKay. We saw the Jeff Schultz report a couple days ago about, Rich McKay apparently does have a lot of influence regarding football ops and day-to-day stuff that we were told for years. Well, not told, we were lied to for years that Rich McKay has nothing to do with this stuff, and all of that now comes out in the press conference that for years he has been meeting with the coach, with the general manager. I think he said he talked to them every other day, and they have a meeting, they have to report up to him, and maybe Bill Belichick doesn't want to do that. And I don't really blame him.
Right. No, it's exactly right. That's been a big point of contention, and a potential stumbling block for Belichick, because, we all know, and that's part of the reason why I'm less enthused about hiring Bill Belichick, is because he is controlling. He does want full control of the organization. He wants control of personnel. He's been taking more and more control of the Patriots organization over the years, and it hasn't turned out great, but I can't imagine he'd want to give that up now. So that is a big sticking point, and it's sort of culminating in this weird power struggle that we're starting to see now, which is that, what will the decision be? Will blank, and I know Zach Klein, I believe it was, tweeted about it. It's like, will blank, is he willing to give up Rich McKay? Or is that a sticking point? Is Belichick going to win out over Rich McKay, who's basically been, Arthur Blank's right-hand man for a decade, or more? And, I kind of think that's not going to happen. I do, to me, that is probably a bridge too far. And that's probably why things cooled off, because Belichick was like, okay, you clearly want me. You rolled out the dreamboat for me and all this, which terrific name for a yacht, by the way. It's top notch. Yeah. But I mean, to me, I think that is the sticking point, and that is why we're seeing things sort of shift, because if Belichick is not willing to come off that demand, it doesn't seem like this is going to get done in Atlanta. But I'm curious, I mean, do you guys think that's one of the big things that is holding that up? I mean, the Rudy Rule has been obliged as of today, Wednesday, where they've met with Ejiro Evero and Raheem Morris in person, 2 candidates, 2 in-person interviews. The rule has been more or less satisfied. We all know the rule is pretty much a joke, but the technicalities have been fulfilled, so they could make a hire at any time now. Joe, do you think that the Rich McKay thing is actually the catalyst for what's been holding up the Belichick hire?
I mean, again, it's all speculation, but it feels that way. Like, I can't really, like, I mean, it just lines up, when you just kind of put the context of what's been reported with what's being reported on the Belichick front, with, as well as kind of the things that we're hearing reported, like from Jeff Schultz about this dynamic, and Zach Klein about this dynamic with Rich McKay and Arthur Blank. And it's just like, it's crazy, like palace drama that you don't really get in a lot of these cycles
right now.
Totally. It's like, who's gonna get got? It's like somebody's gonna like, and there's one other thing with Belichick too, which is, something they said in that press conference following the firing of Arthur Smith was that they basically, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, but like, there was no confidence. There was no vote of confidence by the fans that, like, it was going to get turned around. They weren't going to be able to basically sell the team on Arthur Smith continuing in his job with a new quarterback, which had already just failed in that season. And so, they had to go in a different direction. And to me, I feel like with Belichick and his staff, it's similar. Like Josh McDaniels has a better track record, and some track record with these quarterbacks. But I feel like it's similar in terms of, again, when you talk about those polling numbers and kind of the unfavorables with Belichick, it's just, I think it would turn a lot of fans off. And, you don't want to necessarily make decisions solely based on what you think fans are going to think of it. But I have to think that it somewhat plays into how they're going to market this team, because, if Belichick is the coach, from what I've heard, like, he's not going to allow a lot of, like, digital things like market, like cameras out on the field. I don't know exactly what it is, but I did hear that, like, when he was in New England, just like a lot of that kind of went by the wayside, and they had to kind of figure out some other ways to market the team, because you just didn't want that kind of involvement. He's just so focused and controlling, like you said. Yeah. So, I think that those aspects of his personality, his style of coaching, are kind of just like another obstacle. And maybe Arthur Blank might see it as less of an obstacle, and some other people in the organization might see it as more of an obstacle, because, everybody kind of has different, goals that they're shooting for and what they want out of this thing.
It will be bad news for us covering training camp.
Right.
Like, I want to be able to record 7-on-7s again. That's
it's never going to happen under Bill Belichick. Technically, we were never allowed, Adnan, apparently. So, allegedly,
I still have my conspiracy theory, because we were allowed. We were able to do it, not this camp, but the last year's camp. My conspiracy theory is they wanted to hide Desmond Ridder, so they did not want people to record. And that's when they got really strict on it, because, I got some videos that I was not allowed to post on social media that would not have looked good. But that's neither here nor there. That's just our personal selfishness.
It's our personal beef.
Our personal agendas right now being pushed, all three of us. But also, man, I would really love to have Rich McKay's job security. Like I have no idea how is this the hill that Arthur Blank is dying on? Like I get it. He has been there for, he's been there for 2 decades, but Rich McKay was the general manager here once upon a time. I think it was 2007, and he did so poorly at that job that he was removed from the position, and he actually fell.
He was promoted.
He fell up the stairs. He was promoted.
Right.
And it was like they took him off like football ops, and Jeff Schultz said that he was off football ops during the Mike Smith and Thomas Dimitroff era, coincidentally the most successful era in Atlanta Falcons history. And then he asked to be put back into football ops, and Arthur Blank just said yes. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's so crazy to me, because this dude who was so bad at this is now the guy who is being reported to by the general manager. And this just feels like, me at work, replacing a guy who was really bad at my role, and then I have to report to that guy because he was so bad that he was promoted. I don't know. I just don't understand it. I just don't understand the dynamic. I don't understand the infatuation. I'm more than fine with Rich McKay being the, competition committee, pushing the new stadium, all of that stuff. I have some beef with the football ops stuff because, I mean, like why? Like he's already shown you he's not good at this, and now you're putting him over your coach and general manager. But that's just me ranting because I couldn't be on the show after that press conference.
No, that's
where it's like, it's I still think it's a terrible look that your actual current acting general manager was not there, because it like the semantics of it just looked terrible.
Yes.
And
that was
they
awful.
They tried to explain it away. Oh, he was a flowery branch. Like, is that really more important than like what's going on right now at this press conference? But again, that's neither here nor there. That's just me catching up on the last month that I missed on the show. But I can definitely, to answer your question, Kevin, I definitely am speculating, and I can see and envision a scenario where Rich McKay is the sticking point, and I can definitely envision a scenario where Rich McKay is in Arthur Blank's head or Arthur Blank's ear saying, hey, let's not hire Belichick or Harbaugh, and Harbaugh's off the table. He's with the Chargers now, but basically saying, let's not bring these guys in because that would diminish his own power. Because I genuinely cannot see Bill Belichick answering to Rich McKay. Or honestly, I don't see Bill Belichick answering to anyone but Arthur Blank. I'm sure that's going to be Bill Belichick's sticking point.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, I do think that despite how they treated Fontenot PR wise, I do think that both Blank and McKay actually do want Fontenot in charge of personnel. Apparently they don't want him in charge of the coaching search, which is a little bit weird, but I do think that they like what he's done with personnel. He has
a good track record.
Yes,
he has a good track record the past few years with personnel, and honestly, like even the draft picks are coming around more and more. Like I wasn't a huge fan of that 2021 class, but last year's class looks really good, and Drew Dahlman from that 2021 class he's all of a sudden a top 5 center in the NFL, and it's like that makes that class look a little bit better at this point. But like what he's done in free agency has been, and balancing the books has been great. Like he's a massive asset, and I feel like it would be foolish to just let that go, for this unknown, because Bill Belichick has been, let's be honest, pretty bad at personnel the past few years. That's been a weakness of his.
Yes.
I can't help but just kind of laugh at the situation that Falcons fans find themselves in now, which is like you've got Bill Belichick, who's while he's a certain segment really wants him as a coach. I think the vast majority don't. But then if it's not Belichick, then you're McKay's staying. So it's like you got to pick one of those two paths to go down. And I don't know if either of them fills anybody with the maximum amount of optimism, but I think some of the McKay stuff is overblown to an extent. Like this Falcons, like again, I don't know, because like Jeff Schultz would have a much better kind of a perspective on this, because he clearly, and maybe even Zach Lyon, have like a better idea of what exactly his roles and duties and responsibilities have been since he's been with the Falcons. But the Falcons, since he's been with the club, they've been to an NFC Championship game, a Super Bowl. And the fact that they didn't win that Super Bowl was, not because of Rich McKay. It was because of some like crazy circumstances that happened in a particular game. And if they won that Super Bowl, maybe people think totally differently about Rich McKay. So I do think that maybe some of it could get overblown. I don't want to say say it definitively, because I just don't know how much or little kind of input and influence on football operations he had during some of those better seasons, which it is seeming like he didn't have so much of, that he was more involved with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium construction. But it's just it's one of those things where it's just kind of funny. You can't help but just kind of laugh at the circumstance you find yourself in at this point.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we will, and again, this is something that's going to get touched on in the coming weeks and later shows. But the other thing we have to consider is the quarterback position itself, because Bill Belichick comes in, you're probably going that veteran route. Like, I don't know if he would want to develop a rookie quarterback.
No time.
The fact that,
no time.
Yeah, he doesn't have that much time. Like, I think he'll be here for 3-4 more years. His goal is to pass Don Shula, and then I think he'll have done literally every single thing you can possibly do as a head coach. But that's also something that people need to consider regarding what they want the Falcons to do with the quarterback position. That's going to be directly tied to who you bring in as a head coach. If you bring in Slowick or Ben Johnson, my money is on them wanting to draft a quarterback, develop a quarterback. Bobby Slowick especially, you saw what he did with CJ Stroud this past year, whereas someone like a Belichick, it's all right, we're probably going that veteran route. We're probably going after, a Russell Wilson or a Kirk Cousins, or maybe exploring the trade market for available veteran quarterbacks. So that's another thing that we need to consider, that, we don't really have to talk about right now, because, we don't even know who the head coach is going to be, but it's definitely going to be a factor in making that hire of, what does Arthur Blank want regarding the quarterback position as well?
Yeah. And that's the thing with it, is that I think we all know Belichick is a tremendous defensive coach. The experience he would bring in terms of,
he's still a hell of a,
I feel like that's being underplayed by most
yes,
people.
exactly.
A hell of a coach.
It's not at all about his coaching ability. There's no question in my mind that Belichick is a tremendous defensive coach. I think he could take the personnel the Falcons have and take that defense to the next level. And his experience in the playoffs, if the Falcons were to make it there, would be invaluable in helping to prepare that team for a playoff run earlier than you might expect. Because as we've seen with the Texans, like, you can have some playoff success, but your first year, it's really hard to go all the way with a young team of guys that aren't used to playing in that atmosphere. But the biggest problem with Belichick is the main problem that Atlanta has, which is there's no quarterback in place, and Belichick, outside of Tom Brady, has not been able to find a quarterback. And maybe with Josh McDaniels, everything's okay, right? The 1 year that Mac Jones had with Josh McDaniels was fine, was good even. I mean, they were top 10 offense that year. They crumbled like dust in the playoffs, but there is a case where you can see, like, okay, maybe these things work. Maybe it could work. It's not like if Belichick was hired, there would be no chance of this working out. I hate having an exploding coach. It's like, okay, well, we hire this coach, and whether we win the Super Bowl or we suck terribly, we're going to be hiring a new coach in 3 years. It's just like, that is such a weird place to put yourself in. It's sort of like, it's just odd. And I think that's why no one is interested in Belichick except Atlanta, which we haven't even brought up yet. There's no other interest at this stage. I know there was rumors that, Belichick was talked to by the Cowboys and Eagles. The Cowboys and Eagles didn't even fire their coaches. So, like, there was clearly no serious interest there. No one else is interested in Belichick at this point. And some people have said, well, that's because the Falcons, it's been made clear that the Falcons are just hiring him. But I don't think that's the case. And it wouldn't, if Belichick was trying to strengthen his negotiating position, he would go interview with other teams. So the fact that he's not, I don't think it's him saying, like, I'm not interested in anybody else. Like, I think the Falcons are a good job, but they're not, like, that good of a job that you're like, no, I'm not taking any other calls. Like, I'm just waiting for Atlanta. Like, no, well, respect to Atlanta, but I don't think he's waiting around for us,
I think part of it is because I don't know if there are any teams out there that are willing to potentially cut him a deal like the Falcons would potentially be willing to do in terms of giving him this kind of power that he's had in New England. I think that's why the Cowboys rumors kind of heated up there, and there was some thinking that maybe that would be a good fit because he could kind of work basically with Jerry Jones and have like a close relationship with the owner and in that kind of setup. So I think that's one of the reasons I had to laugh at the exploding coach thing. That's really good. It's like he's going to supernova and one way or the other, like this thing is happening. And I got to say, it reminds me of, and I'll try to be really quick with this, but like I'm a Tottenham fan in the Premier League. You can see the scarf back there. And they had, so for a while, they had like a young kind of promising coach, had some success, but then kind of fell on some hard times. Not like for a long time, but like for like a season, they underperformed. They fired that coach and they had just moved into this new stadium, brand new stadium. They go and hire this guy, Jose Mourinho, if anybody knows, but he's like kind of like this like very prestigious coach. He's won like, the top trophies in Europe with some other clubs. And there was this thinking that you could just like, get this great manager and just like plug him in and he was going to elevate everybody. And he is kind of an abrasive figure. And I don't want to draw too many comparisons because it's totally different, but like it didn't work. And then they tried to do it again with another coach and they tried to keep pushing it. And it still didn't work. And now they hired some kind of guy, like really kind of obscure out of nowhere. And they're in like the best shape they've been in for a while. And like the fans are like more engaged than they've been with the team than, in the last 5 or 6 years, because, it's just funny to see how the, what like ownership wants and like what executives want does not necessarily align with what fans want, which is kind of funny. Cause like, I feel like fans typically end up wanting like more of like a longer term project, like a longer term vision, that you feel like can build over time. And ironically, you would think the fan would be the one who wants this like instant success, but it seems to me that it's kind of the opposite in this case. And maybe some of it comes down to just kind of the, we talk about a lot, but like the stage of Arthur Blank's life that he's in. Obviously, he wants to kind of see his Falcons project come to fruition before it's too late. It always gets morbid when you bring that up, but I think it is, plays into it to some extent.
It does.
I will say though, if we could get some Jose Mourinho like press conferences, I'm all in. I'm all in. Just him talking shit about the other teams and all that.
Well, we got Mike Rothstein in the building there. And I feel like he's the perfect person to have in the press conference room for a coach to tee off on. If Matt Patricia isn't any example. Yeah. Oh, D-led. Yeah, that's what we've been joking. Like, I cannot wait for the first D-led Bill Belichick interaction. It's going to be glorious.
Oh man. Yeah.
But no, I think that's a really good comparison between Mourinho and Bill Belichick. Except for, Mourinho is a bit younger and I think he still wants to coach for a while longer. Yeah. But no, I do like the Tottenham Hotspur comparison all the way down to the fact that, neither the Falcons nor Tottenham have had very much long-term success.
Yeah. It's tough out here.
But honestly, if we really want Bill Belichick, just hire Mike Vrabel. Like he's going to be here in a few years. Like
we have Bill Belichick at home. It's Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I mean he's not as prestigious. He hasn't won as much, but he's also much younger, and I think he does come from that New England Patriots like type tree. And he did just interview in Arthur Blank's house for whatever that's worth. We did make mention about Arthur Blank conducting those interviews. I wouldn't mind Mike Vrabel at all. I think that's a name we haven't really mentioned much. I think I said Slowick and Johnston are my top two. I would put Vrabel as a close third. And I genuinely have no idea why the Tennessee Titans let him go. I get it. It wasn't a great season. But also you really haven't given him, as much to work with. And I think he would be like a sort of that younger, defensive coach, well, younger than Belichick, who probably would not need full personnel control, even though he would definitely have, have a strong voice when it comes to that. But yeah, Mike Vrabel, I would not be upset at all if the Falcons ended up snagging him.
No, not at all. And I the only hiccup I think with Vrabel is I think he's very likely to reconnect with Arthur Smith, and that would be very awkward.
Man, wouldn't that be awkward?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a deal breaker, because I mean, I don't really know who else Vrabel would go for. Like, I mean, those two had a great working relationship. The offense they had together was great, all that stuff. So that's probably going to be a bit of an awkward conversation. But yeah, I mean, I do want to address some common things here real quick. I'll get to Ray Moon's $5 donation. Thank you, Ray. He says, if we hire Belichick, I feel like this could sink us back to irrelevancy for the next 30 years. Well, that's a long time, Ray. Don't put that on us. He says he feels it's a slap in the metal face of Samuel L. Jackson, or yeah, the bird god, Samuel L. Bad juju. Yeah, I mean, hopefully it wouldn't be that bad, Ray. I don't think it would be that bad, but I mean, it could easily set them back like 5 years, because the other part of the Bill Belichick thing is they're going to reshape the entire team and roster and coaching staff to suit Bill Belichick. It's going to be a win now thing. They're going to move all this cap around and do all this stuff. And it's going to last like 2 to 3 years, and then it's going to get blown up again. So if it doesn't work,
very short-sighted.
Yes. And if it gets a Super Bowl, then you're not going to hear me complaining one bit. I mean,
right.
It's like, if it works, it works. But
right.
I just don't think they're that close.
But also, we saw that same thing happen in 2020, the 2020 offseason, where, you know, Arthur Blank, who we were talking about it, he should have let go of Dimitroff and Dan Quinn before that season. Instead, gives them another year. And what are they going to do? Like, of course, like, they're going to make those short-sighted moves. And that's one of the main reasons why the Falcons were in such a bad cap situation for Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot's first 2 years, was directly linked to that offseason of, all right, we're going to move this money around. We have to make these win now moves because our jobs are on the line. And I feel like it's just going to be a lot more of the same with Bill Belichick, because, you know, he has no incentive to make this a very long-term, you know, 5 years from now type project, because I feel like genuinely he wants to come in, break Don Shula's record, and then, you know, ride off into the sunset. And, you know, do you really want to be the team that sort of has to pay that piper years from now if you don't win the Super Bowl? And I don't think this team is close enough to that. Like, if this team was one piece away, you know, I'm all in. Like, I'm all in for it. But this team is, I feel like, more than just one piece away. And I think, you know, with a really good offseason, they can sort of make their way toward there, but we're not really in that, all right, let's put all of our chips in the middle of the table type situation yet. Whereas, you know, if Bill Belichick comes in, that's what he's going to do. Like that's what he's doing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the sticking point here is going to be that Belichick's going to want total control. And I think in his mind, he needs it because this is a short time thing. And I don't think he's hiding that in any way. I think he's probably made it clear, like, I'm probably going to coach a few more years. I would love to bring a Super Bowl here, but like, I need to do it my way. And like, that's the way it's going to work and all this. And, you know, I'm just not convinced by it. It doesn't mean it can't work.
I will say, if we're hiring just Bill Belichick, the coach, with no personnel control, I'm in. I think he's still a hell of a head coach. You saw, I think he still has his fastball when it comes to defense. Like, when it comes to defensive adjustments, when it comes to coaching up. We saw it with the Patriots last year. But through all those injuries, the Patriots were still a top 10 defense in the NFL, and defense has never been their problem. But I don't think that Bill Belichick is really going to, you know, go for that, to just come in as, you know, just the head coach, especially after having 20 years of personnel control over in New England. Like, that's a big step down to sort of sacrifice that. And not many people would do that. And I don't see why he would do that for the Falcons.
It's a pretty young roster too for the Falcons, especially like on the offensive side of the ball. You've got a lot of young players, and I do wonder how they would, you know, take to a coach like Belichick, who is kind of, you know, he's always had like trusted guys that he keeps around for a long time. He's developed some of these players who turned into, you know, great long-term, like, you know, just like legendary players for the Patriots. And I do wonder, just from a team dynamic standpoint as well, as to like how well would he mesh? How well would he mesh with the players that the Falcons have adopted on this roster? Because like Arthur Smith's personality was very much like a player's coach, like, and they all loved him. And it just seems very different than the way Belichick would kind of manage these players.
Yeah, and you wonder how that goes down, and that's definitely part of it too. But I know we had some people saying like, oh well, 3 years. I mean, that's how long Arthur Smith was around, so who cares? Like, because you're just gonna be hiring a new coach in 3 years anyway. Well, the idea is no, you're not, and I know people will be like, well, that's what happened last time. Well, that was the first time that's happened in a long time, because Dan Quinn was here far more than 3 years. And you have to think if he won that Super Bowl, probably would have been here longer.
He'd still be here today.
Whether that was good or whether that would be a good thing or bad thing's up to interpretation. But Mike Smith here for a long time. The previous two hires, and again, I think people are overreacting to Arthur Smith not working out and forgetting that this process of hiring a young first time, or well, not necessarily super young, but like a first time head coach that was a coordinator, has worked out well for the Falcons. Now, it hasn't resulted in a Super Bowl win, but that's rare. I think if you're only judging things through the lens of did it win a Super Bowl, you're going to be disappointed 99% of the time, because only one of 32 teams wins the Super Bowl every year. The best way to win a Super Bowl is to make the playoffs every year and win playoff games, and hope that one year you get lucky. I know people will say like, well, look at the Bills. I mean, they haven't, they've lost a bunch, but the best way to get to the Super Bowl is to make the playoffs consistently. And, oh, go ahead.
To go back to Quinn, I think he's like an interesting reference point because and we were talking earlier about, or I was actually talking about, really liking some of these defensive coaches. And it's kind of funny that like Dan Quinn was a defensive coach who then comes in and oversees like a historically good Falcons offense, that leads them to the Super Bowl, and they should have won it, which goes to show. And I think the reason why was because Quinn really understood the way that the game was evolving tactically and was able to like understand who the brightest coaches were going to be to come in and build his staff that way. And so, and it's for that reason that I don't want to like discount any of these defensive guys, especially a guy like Raheem Morris, who was part of that staff in Atlanta and has, been around some of the best offensive minds and has worked on the offensive side of the ball as well. I'm interested to see how those guys would be able to kind of staff up basically. And I don't want to discount them. I think it's just, I would caution people to write off these guys just because the Falcons do need to get the quarterback situation sorted out. It could still happen with a defensive coordinator type.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because these guys on the it was interesting actually hearing Arthur Smith talked about this at some point last season, talking about like the relationship that he had with Ryan Nielsen, and like he always like asking Ryan like, if I do this, what are you going to do to defend me? So they have these conversations about, and so it's kind of a two-way thing about how the game is evolving tactically with like offensive coaches and defensive coaches, and kind of how that balances itself out. And so defensive coaches can sometimes have really good ideas for what would make an effective offense, given the team's personnel and style.
Yeah.
And also, I do want to say just about that, the Arthur Smith comparison, because I've seen people try to make that, sort of a negative for Johnson and Slowick of, oh, last time we went out and we hired the bright young offensive like coordinator minds, from the AFC South, no less. But I don't think that's fair, because the Falcons went out and pretty much got one of the only guys who like I can think of who just did not value the quarterback position. And I think that I think we're in agreement that Arthur Smith would probably still be here if they, sort of put more resources into the quarterback position, because, all they did with the quarterback position, they signed, a veteran Marcus Mariota. They signed a veteran Taylor Heineke for small money compared to other quarterbacks. And they used up a 3rd-round draft pick and tried to build build everything else up. And then I think the idea was, all right, we'll build everything else up, and then we'll will put in the quarterback, as the finishing touch, but you really can't do that in the modern NFL. Like the league just won't allow you to go against the grain in that way. And I'm pretty positive that whoever comes in next as the head coach, I think their very first move will be, all right, we need to go address the quarterback position. I'm pretty sure that's likely one of the first questions that's being asked in all of these interviews, is what are you going to do about the quarterback position, next season and moving forward.
Yeah,
I would argue, and again, this is just me speculating. I would argue that if he knew that Ritter not panning out was going to cost him his job, that they would not have gone that way.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have wanted to put his coaching tenure in that basket on an unproven second-year quarterback, but that's the way it went. That's
somehow
the NFL,
that's the way it ended up. Yeah, but
I'm pretty sure he won't make the same mistake again, and I'm pretty sure other first-time coaches will see that, and they will, what's the old saying? How does the old saying go? Intelligence is learning from your own mistakes, but wisdom is learning from the mistakes of others. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more wisdom regarding, the Falcons head coaching job, learning from Arthur Smith's mistakes with whoever the next head coach is going to be. I just hope that Arthur Blank doesn't overcorrect.
Yeah,
because
totally.
I feel like that's sort of happened in the past with the Falcons' previous few head coaching hires. Remember, goes back to Bobby Petrino, and Mike Smith was pretty much the polar opposite of Bobby Petrino personality-wise, and he comes in, he's a defensive guy. Then after Mike Smith, they sort of overcorrect, and they go down. And I'm not saying that any of these were bad hires, other than Petrino. Petrino was a terrible hire, but after Mike Smith, they go the polar opposite personality-wise with Dan Quinn, who's this high energy, like he's buzzing sort of thing. And then after Dan Quinn, you go with Arthur Smith, who's the polar opposite regarding schematics. And Arthur Smith is the offensive guy, the play caller. Dan Quinn was on the defensive side. So I hope they don't overcorrect with this one, and I hope they don't let the sins of Arthur Smith sort of cost you the opportunity at getting that next bright young mind like a Bobby Slowick or Ben Johnson, where they're like, all right, we don't want the first time head coach. It didn't work for us last time. Let's go with, someone who's, much older and much more experienced, which, that would be Bill Belichick in this situation.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, and I know this is not going to be like a post-mortem on Arthur Smith, but like I really feel like he was on the right track with this team, like in terms of like the ideas, what they were building. Obviously, things kind of fell apart last year, and there were definitely mistakes that I think he made that led to that. But I don't think it's a surprise that I think there was like more than 7 teams that are interested in having him as their offensive coordinator. That's a quarter of the league. Like I think that the league still. I think that shows you that the league recognizes that the problems with the Falcons offense last year were not necessarily his ideas and what he wanted to do schematically, but the fact that he didn't have a quarterback basically that wouldn't turn the ball over. And again, I think that there's some things that he maybe could have done to prevent some of that damage from happening last year. And I think that personnel wise, I thought that he thought they could get away with some things, especially like in the receiver room, that they just didn't really have a lot of diversity in terms of player archetypes. Anyway, that's going down a different path. But yeah, I agree with you in terms of like, they don't need to necessarily just because they fired Arthur and they want to go with a new coach, which is totally justifiable. They don't need to just like scrap the entire plan. I think that they were kind of going down the path using to bring in a coach now who's going to continue to, foster these pieces that you've invested in on the offensive side of the ball, these young playmakers, and get that quarterback that can, we've talked about it before. What we want Ritter to do, just distribute the ball around and not turn it over, and you're probably going to have success.
Because, I mean, as a coach, too, like, you're one quarterback away from having a lot of success with this team.
Yeah.
And the pieces are there. Sure, they still need a pass rusher. They still need, in my opinion, another safety. I don't think Richie Grant is him regarding a starting spot next year. So you do still have some holes to plug here and there on the defense. Nothing too scary. You have a lot of cap space. This team is not in the dire straits that it was in 2 or 3 years ago when Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were just starting out. But on offense, you have, a top 5 offensive line this season. And moving forward, all of them are pretty much going to be back together. You have, all of these amazing top 10 skill position weapons. You are one quarterback away from really, really being successful and in the worst division in football. Like, look at the state of the rest of the division. Like, the Carolina Panthers are in a bad spot. The New Orleans Saints are in a really bad spot. And, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I know they just won it and they just, beat the Eagles, but they have a lot of free agents. They don't have a lot of cap space. We'll see what happens with Baker Mayfield. If he leaves, they'll have to restart, at the quarterback position themselves. So, this hit on quarterback, and the Falcons can really sort of invest in moving up in the draft right now because they have a lot of these spots filled. And you'll definitely make strides, and you'll be on the right track in the NFL to really win now and win later.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of good points about it. And I think one of the things that was brought up, which is defensive coaches can provide a lot of insights on offense, is absolutely true. Like, I think that's part of the reason I'm such a big fan of Bobby Slowick, who has been a defensive coach briefly. I was a defensive assistant, but he did work on that side of the ball. He was an analyst at PFF for a couple of years, which I found kind of funny. But he's worked on both sides of the ball. And that's another reason I like Raheem Morris a lot too, is he's worked extensively on both sides of the ball, essentially being an offensive and defensive coordinator at times. And that experience is valuable as a head coach, where you do have to take on a obviously wider role than just handling one part of the team. So that's a big part of my appreciation of Slowick. And one more thing I will mention about Slowick is that if there's one national guy you should pay attention to with regards to Falcons news, it's Steve Weish, who when he says something about the Falcons, I guarantee you it's correct. Whatever he's saying is 100% true. So when he chimes in on somebody saying, oh, the Falcons were impressed, and he says very impressed, that's serious. So I do think that Slowick is a serious contender now. They moved to book him quickly for another interview after that first one. And we'll have to see how that goes. Tonight, the Falcons, as of just a few minutes ago, it's announced that they completed their interview with Vrabel. So the search is heating up. I don't think we have too much longer to wait. I doubt it'll be settled by the weekend, but it could definitely be settled by Monday. And part of the decision might rest on what happens with the Lions. The Lions make the Super Bowl. Have to think the Falcons probably aren't going to wait around for those interviews with Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. So that could force their hand earlier if the Lions are eliminated, which I sort of hope they're not, just because I think we'd all like to see the Lions in the Super Bowl. I think that'd be fun. But if that happens, then maybe they will wait for those interviews, or maybe they'll be so blown away by Slowick's second interview that they pounce on him, or maybe Bill Belichick decides he's willing to work with Rich McKay and they hire him, or who knows. But we're coming down the home stretch. Yeah. So
although the Falcons do have history, that they did wait for a Super Bowl to be completed before hiring a head coach during the Dan Quinn hiring. However, on the other hand, that was I think, in my opinion, much weaker free agent coaching class than this one. I feel like it's a consensus that this free agent coaching class is, maybe the best one in years. Whereas, remember that one, I think the other big candidate was like Rex Ryan, and there was, I think,
come a long way.
We have come a long way. Yeah. So, I don't think that they will wait around for Ben Johnson, but the team does have a track record where they have in the past. So, that's just something to consider. But, that would also suck for us, because that would mean, waiting weeks and weeks until we get the announcement. And, I sort of want it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Gathering Clouds with the £50 donation for the Senior Bowl fundraiser. Thank you. Got love from the UK here. Thank you, Gathering Clouds. He says, thanks for the analysis. You're welcome. Also, PV chimes in saying, I wonder what kind of dirt McKay has on blank to hold as collateral. No, I don't think there's anything like that going on. I do think that the honest truth is that McKay is blank's confidant. He's one of two confidants. The other one we've had on this show, Brett Jukes. Those are his guys. Brett Jukes is his right-hand man. McKay's his left-hand man, or whatever you want to say. Those are his guys. He trusts them implicitly. I'm sure they're friends. And to McKay's credit, I think he's an excellent business partner. I think he has great business instincts. He was instrumental in getting the stadium built. He's clearly one of the most respected figures in the NFL as the chair of the competition committee. That is a huge role. Some people have speculated he could be in line for commissioner if Goodell ever decided he didn't want to be commissioner anymore. So this is a man who does have strong connections, who is plugged in. The question is, can
you imagine what a Falcons thing that would be if Rich McKay just leaves scorned, away from the Falcons, betrayed, and then just becomes the next commissioner of the NFL.
He becomes the commissioner
and then
just destroys
takes
Atlanta.
It out on the Falcons for the next 2 decades.
Yep. There you go. It could happen. But there's a reason McKay was promoted to a business role. It's because he's great with business. But is he good with football operations? And I think that's the one thing we aren't convinced of. And how much influence does he have? Does he have a lot of influence? Does he have a little influence? Is he responsible for these things? We don't know. We're not there. We're not privy to it. But it's enough to be concerning, and it's clearly enough, I think, to hold up the conversations for moving forward with Bill Belichick, and we'll see how that develops over the next week. But for now, you guys have our thoughts on the search. You have our preferences, quote unquote. And we'll have to see how this develops over the next couple of days. The next time we have live, it will be from Mobile. So that'll be next Wednesday. The Senior Bowl will be underway. That'll be day 2, I believe. We'll have a mock draft coming out before that, either late this week or early next week. And we'll be getting into the offseason. The offseason's been kind of like a little truncated because usually I'd probably have multiple mock drafts by now and we'd be getting into free agency talk. But we got this coaching search to get through first. And honestly, that sort of informs a lot of our ideas about where the team is going to go, like what's going to be available, what kind of players do they want on defense? Are they going to draft a quarterback or sign a veteran or trade for something like? So we're kind of in a holding pattern with some of that stuff, but I think we got a very exciting offseason ahead of us, no matter who they hired, who they do end up going with here. So we thank everyone for hanging out with us. First of all, I want to thank Joe Patrick. He's at JAPatrick200 for hanging out with us tonight. Joe, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Nope, you can just follow me on Twix, as Mike Rothstein says, at JAPatrick200.
Excellent. That's a good one. We also have, of course, co-host Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way, finally back with us. Adnan, anything else you'd like to add before we sign off tonight?
Well, I do want to plug an article that I wrote, not for the Falcoholic, but for SBNation.com. I wrote something up about what I think are, in my opinion, the 5 best Super Bowl ads of all time. So that was a really fun write-up. So, go on SB Nation and check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Check that out. Yeah, I'm sure that's a fun one. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. We got lots more to get to. I'm sure the excitement is just beginning for this offseason. No matter who's hired, I'm sure it's going to be a whirlwind. So thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us. Thanks to Joe and Adnan once again. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. Helps the channel out. If you're listening to that podcast audio, leave us that 5-star review on your platform of choice. Check out the channel memberships if you're a video viewer, if you want to support the show. Patreon for podcast listeners. I do believe we'll have possibly a patron show from the Senior Bowl. I'm trying to figure out the logistics of that, but if you want to take part in that, patron channel member show probably coming next week, if not the week after. We're definitely going to have patron mock drafts and stuff like that as well. So take a look at all that. If you're interested, thanks again to BetOnline and to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's episode. Until next time, guys, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, check out thefalcoholic.com for all that great written content. Until next time, guys, thanks so much for joining us on the Falcoholic Live. We'll see you next